Hello everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story.
The letter arrived on a windless Tuesday, slipped through Margaret's mail slot with no sound at all. There was no return address, no postmark, just her name in elegant, old-fashioned ink, Margaret T. Ayres, written in a hand she hadn't seen in over 40 years. She opened it slowly, almost reverently. Inside was a single scrap of parchment, yellowed at the edges, and on it only one line. "You promised to come back when it was time. The bell has rung. L." Her hands began to tremble. She stood frozen in the hallway, the letter fluttering like a loose leaf in her grip. Somewhere behind her, the old grandfather clock chimed 5, though she'd stopped winding it years ago. Margaret sat down on the nearest chair, heart thudding. Her mind tried to dismiss it, maybe a prank, maybe a coincidence. But her body knew better. Her body remembered the fog, the trees that whispered in dead languages, the house that leaned in as if listening, and the bell. Always the bell. She hadn't thought of Cold Earth Hollow in decades. Not since she was 10. Not since the incident no one in her family would speak of. They moved the morning after, bags hastily packed, her mother's knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. Her father silent, her little brother unusually pale, as if something had been taken from him in the night. Margaret had never gone back. Until now, the hollow had remained locked in the dusty attic of her memory. But that one line, penned by someone or something that called itself L, undid the lock. That night, she dreamed. Margaret stood on the edge of a crooked path, surrounded by trees that bent inward as if eavesdropping. Their leaves didn't rustle. There was no breeze. The silence had weight, like a velvet curtain pressing in from all sides. She recognized this place, though it had no name in the waking world. Cold Earth Hollow. The forest floor was damp and spongy beneath her bare feet. She was wearing a white nightgown, one she hadn't owned in years. Its hem was soaked black with mud. Overhead, the sky churned in slow gray swirls, neither day nor night. Time didn't seem to pass here. It collected, like dust in a sealed room. A bell rang in the distance, low, slow, sorrowful. She turned toward the sound. The trees parted of their own accord. There, at the end of the path, stood the old parsonage house. It leaned to one side as though weary. The roof sagged in the middle. Moss dripped from the eaves like long green fingers. The windows were clouded with grime, but she could feel eyes behind them, watching, waiting. The door was open just enough to show darkness within. Another bell toll. Margaret stepped forward, her legs moving without command. A voice echoed softly, not spoken aloud, but delivered directly into her thoughts. "You left something here." "I didn't mean to," she whispered. The door creaked open wider, beckoning. As she approached, she noticed something new. Just beside the door, nailed to the weathered wood, a child's drawing. Crumpled, water-stained. A stick-figure girl holding hands with a much taller figure. Above them, scribbled in red crayon, "Don't forget me." Her breath hitched. The bell rang a third time, louder now. And then she woke. She sat upright in bed, drenched in sweat, The sheets tangled around her. Her throat was dry, her heart galloping. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and froze. The floor beneath her was wet. She turned on the lamp with shaking fingers. Mud, thick, black, and cold, smeared in the shape of footprints, her size, bare. They led from the foot of her bed all the way to the front door.
Margaret knelt beside the prints. The mud was real, dark as oil, pungent with the scent of iron and rot. She touched it with trembling fingers, still damp, still cold. It soaked into the fibers of the rug like it had seeped up from the earth, not tracked in from outside. She followed the prints across the wood floor. They were spaced close together, careful steps, as if the one who left them, she, had been moving slowly, almost reverently. They trailed across the living room, past the fireplace, and toward the front door. The door was locked, deadbolt intact, chain still set, no signs of a break-in, except the footprints were going both directions. She stared at them for a long time, as if enough willpower might make them disappear, but they remained, silent and accusing, leading into the house and then back out again, as though something or someone had walked her back to bed. Margaret wrapped her arms around herself. The silence in the house was now oppressive. No refrigerator hum, no creaking floorboards, no birdsong outside the window. It was as if everything had paused, waiting for her next move. She checked the clock. 3:07 a.m. She didn't go back to sleep. Instead, she made tea with shaking hands and stared out the kitchen window where the backyard melted into mist. For the first time in decades, her memories returned, not in flashes, but in slow, creeping vines that wrapped around her ribs and squeezed. She saw herself at 10 years old, standing before that same house in the hollow, her mother crying quietly into her hands, her father dragging a trunk across the gravel, muttering, "We'll never speak of this again." Her little brother Leo standing apart, barefoot and mud-soaked, whispering something to the wind. And behind them all, the bell. It had rung once, low and somber, and that was the last time she had seen him, the last time she saw Leo. Leo had only been 7 when they'd last stood in the hollow, fragile, wide-eyed. He had always been different, quieter, sensitive in ways their parents never understood. He'd talked to things in the corners of rooms, asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. "Who's that behind you?" he once asked Margaret while they were alone. "The tall man in the dark hat." Their parents chalked it up to imagination. Margaret wasn't so sure. She'd seen things too, heard them mostly, at night, especially in the hollow. Leo loved it there, the woods, the old paths, the crumbling grave markers behind the chapel. He said they whispered to him, that they were lonely. "They just want someone to remember them," he told her once, touching a stone so old the name had worn away. Then came the night of the storm. She remembered the thunder shaking the parsonage walls, her mother lighting candles when the power went out, her father pacing by the door, arguing in hushed tones with someone who wasn't there. The bell had rung twice, once at dusk, once again just past midnight, but no one had touched it. The bell tower had been half collapsed even then, unreachable. That night, Leo disappeared. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just a window open to the rain and a trail of wet footprints, small ones, leading into the woods. The search lasted 3 days. Dogs refused to go beyond a certain clearing. Locals shook their heads and muttered phrases Margaret didn't understand. "It's taken him," one woman said. and crossed herself. The hollow don't give back what it keeps. But on the third day, Leo came back. At least, something like Leo. He was found kneeling before the chapel ruins, soaked but unhurt, pale as a grave sheet, eyes glazed. When Margaret ran to him, he didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared past her shoulder, smiling faintly at something she couldn't see. From then on, he barely spoke. At night, he whispered to the corners again, muttered about the man with the bell voice and the door under the floor. Their parents called it trauma, took him to doctors. None helped. Then they left the hollow behind, and 2 weeks later, Leo was gone again. Vanished from his room without a trace. This time, he didn't come back.
The morning after the dream, Margaret stood in her hallway, suitcase in hand. She hadn't told anyone, not her sister, not the women at the historical society where she volunteered twice a week. Not even the post office would miss her. Retirement had made her life quiet, nearly invisible. That suited her just fine, until now. Now the silence felt like permission. She locked the door behind her. The suitcase was light. Just a change of clothes, a journal, a flashlight, her father's old compass, and a photograph. The last one ever taken of her and Leo. They stood in front of the parsonage, a faded autumn sun behind them, the bell tower already in ruins. She was smiling. He wasn't. The photograph had a thumb-shaped smudge over Leo's face. She'd tried to clean it dozens of times, but it never came off. A stain from the developing fluid, maybe. Or something else. Margaret climbed into her aging Volvo and pulled out of the driveway. As she passed the city limits, she realized she had no idea where she was going. But her hands seemed to. They guided the wheel with a familiarity that chilled her. She took rural roads she didn't remember learning, turned at crossroads that hadn't been on any GPS. Gas stations came and went like dreams. One moment there, the next vanished behind her in the rearview mirror. By mid-afternoon, the pavement gave way to gravel. Weeds sprouted through cracks like fingers reaching from below. The trees leaned closer, the sky dimmed, though the sun still hung in the sky. Her radio sputtered, then died. Then she saw it. A slanted, wooden sign nailed to a post, barely legible. Cold Earth Hollow. Visitors must knock. Her stomach turned. The road narrowed to a dirt path swallowed by forest. Margaret parked her car beneath a crooked oak and stepped out. The silence was immediate, total. She was back. The dirt path was narrower than she remembered, the grass encroaching from both sides, damp and slick beneath her boots. Trees hunched low with the weight of creeping moss, their bark peeling in long gray strips like old skin. Above, the sky had dulled to a lifeless ash color, though her watch read 2:47 p.m. Margaret paused to listen. No birds, no insects, just windless, muffled silence, as if the entire hollow had been blanketed in wool. She continued. Her breath slowed. Each step sank slightly, the soil sucking at her soles. As she moved deeper, she began to see them. Stones half swallowed by earth and ivy. Not grave markers exactly. Smaller, cruder. Hand-carved symbols etched in unfamiliar script. Some were arranged in circles. Others leaned into one another, like they'd tried to escape and collapsed instead. She remembered these vaguely. As a child, she thought they were fairy circles. Leo had called them warning posts. Up ahead, the path opened into a small clearing. There it was, the parsonage. Even now, after decades, she recognized the warped silhouette. It leaned to the left as if caught mid-collapse. Roofline bowed, porch railing long gone. The bell tower beside it, little more than a rotting scaffold, still stood. just barely, and the bell itself remained, rusted, cracked, but whole. And worse, Margaret could see it was swaying, just slightly, just enough. There was no wind. Her breath caught. She approached slowly, each footstep deliberate. As she neared the front steps, something new caught her eye. A child's drawing, nailed to the frame beside the door. It was the same one from her dream. A stick-figure girl, a taller figure looming beside them. Red crayon above them read, "Don't forget me." The drawing was old, water-damaged, the paper curled and yellowed. But the nail was new, shiny, recently hammered in. Something had been waiting for her. She reached for the door. The door creaked open under Margaret's trembling hand, the sound scraping through the silence like a fingernail on glass. The air inside was thick with dampness and decay, a stale, choking breath of forgotten years. Her flashlight flickered as she swept its beam across the room. Dust motes swirled in the air, caught in the narrow shafts of light breaking through boarded windows. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet, some loose, some broken, and all warped with time. The walls were stained with water damage, mottled brown and green, as if the house itself was slowly rotting from the inside out. Faded wallpaper peeled in curling strips, revealing gray plaster, cracked like dry earth. In the corner, a small wooden table lay overturned, its legs splintered. Across the floor, the scattered remnants of a child's playthings, dolls missing eyes, cracked toy soldiers, a bent tin whistle. Margaret's throat tightened. She stepped deeper, the beam landing on a fireplace choked with ashes, long cold. Above it hung a crooked portrait, the frame askew, a faded photograph of a man in clerical robes. His eyes seemed to follow her, dark and unreadable. She swallowed hard, then moved toward the back of the house, drawn by a faint sound, like a whispering, like wind on the breath. Her flashlight caught a narrow stairwell leading down. Basement. The voice beckoned. She hesitated at the top of the steps, the wooden railings splintered and slick with mold. From below came the slow, steady toll of a bell. Not loud, but unmistakable. A deep, mournful sound vibrating through the floorboards. The bell was under the house. Her hand tightened on the flashlight as she began the descent. Each creaking step echoed, swallowed by darkness. At the bottom, the air was colder, heavy with the scent of earth and iron. In the corner, something glinted. A small metal ring attached to a thick rope disappearing into the blackness above. The bell's rope. But how? Her heart hammered. The whispering rose, a chorus of voices, overlapping, soft, pleading. "Remember us. Help me. Don't leave." Margaret's throat caught in her throat. She realized the voices were not coming from outside, but inside the walls themselves. Margaret's fingers clenched the rope tightly, the cold metal ring biting into her palm. The bell's faint tolling echoed around her like a heartbeat in the dark. She swallowed hard and peered into the shadows beneath the staircase. The voices, barely more than whispers, rose and fell like a mournful tide. "Remember us," they repeated, a chorus of sorrowful tones that made her skin prickle. She took a shaky breath and stepped forward, the beam of her flashlight revealing rough-hewn stone walls damp with moss and moisture. The air grew colder, heavier with every step. Somewhere beneath her feet, the earth seemed to hum, alive with secret sorrow. A loose stone shifted under her boot. She knelt, running her hand over the cold surface. Carved into the stone was a symbol she recognized from the forest, a spiral encircled by tiny runes, worn smooth with time. Suddenly, a gust of frigid air swept through the basement, and the bell tolled once more, louder, as if the house itself had awakened. The voices surged, voices overlapping in a chaotic plea. "Help me. Don't forget. It waits." Margaret's heart raced. She was no stranger to grief, but this was something different. A weight pressing down on her soul, demanding acknowledgement. A promise unkept. Her thoughts flicked back to Leo, his pale face, his silence, the way he had vanished without a trace. Was this what called him? What kept him here? She whispered, voice trembling. A sudden creak startled her. From the far corner of the basement, something shifted. She trained the flashlight there, a faint glow, like a flickering candle. Margaret took a hesitant step forward. The glow revealed a small door, half hidden beneath a pile of rotting wooden boards. It was sealed with rusted iron hinges and a heavy latch engraved with the same spiral symbol. The voices hushed, as if waiting. With trembling hands, she reached out to the latch.
Margaret's fingers brushed the rusted latch, and a chill raced up her spine. The metal was colder than anything she'd ever touched, biting, unnatural. Her breath came shallow, clouding from the stale basement air. She hesitated. The voices were silent now, their absence almost more unsettling than their cries. Slowly, she lifted the latch. It resisted with a groan, then gave way. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow, dark passage descending deeper into the earth. A faint smell of damp soil and decay drifted out. Something older than the house itself. The beam of her flashlight flickered uncertainly as she stepped inside, the floor beneath her feet uneven and loose. The passage was tight. The walls scraped her shoulders as she moved forward. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, each step a steady rhythm, marking her descent into a place where light and time seemed to vanish. At the passage's end, the wall opened into a cavernous chamber. The light caught something gleaming in the gloom. A tarnished bronze bell suspended from thick chains, swinging slightly despite the still air. Its surface was etched with symbols, the same spiral, intertwined with figures that seemed to move and shift as she looked. Beneath the bell lay an altar of rough stone, stained dark with something dried and old. Margaret stepped closer, and her foot brushed against something soft. She knelt, shining the light on it, a tattered piece of cloth embroidered with a child's name, Leo. Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision as she reached out, touching the fabric like a lifeline. The bell rang once, softly, mournfully, a call she couldn't ignore. And in that moment, Margaret understood. The Hollow had never let her brother go. Margaret's fingers trembled as she clutched the tattered cloth bearing her brother's name. The fabric was fragile, worn thin by time and tears, yet it anchored her to the painful truth she'd spent years burying. A whisper brushed against her ear, a voice both familiar and distant, a breath of wind carrying the echo of a promise long forgotten. You
promised, Margaret." She darted her eyes around the cavernous chamber, heart pounding like a drum. The bell swung gently above the altar, its soft tolling resonating through the cold stone walls. She felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting for her to fulfill what she had once vowed. "I don't remember," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't know." The voice grew insistent, weaving through the shadows like a thread pulling her closer. "You left us. You must come back." The air thickened, pressing in on her chest. Images flashed unbidden behind her eyelids. A childhood pact, whispered under a silver moon, a promise to protect, to return if the bell ever rang. Her breath hitched. It was all coming back, the fear, the guilt, the unbearable loneliness that had clawed at her soul since Leo vanished. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she knelt before the altar. "I'm here," she said, voice barely audible. "I'm here now." The bell tolled again, louder this time, shaking the very air. Shadows shifted, coalescing into shapes. Figures of children, pale and translucent, reaching out to her with hollow eyes. Margaret reached out, trembling. "Tell me what to do." The oldest voice, soft and aching, spoke again. "Find the bell's voice. Free us all." A cold wind surged through the chamber, and the bell's ringing became a chorus, echoing promises, forgotten names, and the heavy weight of a family's shattered past. Margaret knew her journey was only beginning.
Margaret wiped the tears from her cheeks, the cold stone floor biting through her thin clothing. The air still hummed with the bell's fading toll, and the chamber felt alive, throbbing with unseen presences pressing close. The ghostly figures hovered in the dim light, faces pale as moonlight, their eyes pools of sorrow. They whispered names, lost children, vanished souls, each voice weaving a thread into the tapestry of the hollow's curse. "Find the voice," one murmured, "the one who holds the bell's song." Margaret shivered, but stood. Her legs were stiff and weak, but determination burned through the fear. She scanned the chamber, her flashlight catching a corner obscured by shadow. There, a low stone doorway framed by curling vines of root and moss beckoned, a passage further down, deeper into the earth. Her breath caught. Another bell's voice, softer, sweeter, a melody like a lullaby rising from the depths below. "Is this where I find it?" she whispered. The whispers answered with silence. Margaret steeled herself and stepped forward, descending once more into the dark. The walls closed in, the air growing heavier, suffocating. Her flashlight flickered, then steadied. Ahead, faint glimmers glowed, tiny lights suspended in the gloom like fireflies. She reached out, touching one. It flickered and transformed, a glowing orb containing a fragment of memory. She glimpsed a boy's laughter, a mother's lullaby, a father's stern face. And Leo, standing beneath the bell tower, reaching up as the bell tolled. The memories pulled at her heart. "Hold on! I'm coming!" The passage twisted again, leading her to an iron door, cold and ancient, carved with the spiral runes. Margaret laid her palm on the metal, feeling a pulse beneath. The bell's voice, waiting. Margaret's palm pressed against the cold iron door, and the pulse beneath her skin quickened, like the heartbeat of the hollow itself. The spirals carved deep into the metal seemed to shimmer faintly, as if alive, breathing with the same slow rhythm as the bell overhead. Her breath came shallow, fingers curling tight around the rough surface. The air was thick, smelling of earth and forgotten things. Behind the door, she could hear it now. The bell's faint, steady ringing. The voice she had come to find. With a deep breath, Margaret pressed her shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. She tried again, pushing harder, but the door was locked tight, sealed by time and shadow. Frustration and fear collided within her. She remembered the stories, the warnings carved on the stones outside the house, the whispers from her childhood about doors not meant to be opened. But she had no choice. Her eyes scanned the doorframe, the floor, searching for a key or latch. Then, at the base of the door, hidden under a tangle of roots, she spotted something glinting. A small iron key, rusted but intact. Her heart skipped a beat. She reached down, picked up the key, and held it to the lock. It fit perfectly. With a slow, creaking turn, the door groaned open. Beyond was a spiral staircase winding down into deeper darkness. The bell's voice grew louder, now a song haunting and pure, filling the narrow space with an eerie melody. Margaret stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her. The air grew colder, heavier, and the walls seemed to close in with every step. Her flashlight caught faint etchings along the stairwell, scenes of children reaching up to the bell, faces twisted in fear and longing. At the bottom, a heavy stone chamber opened, lit by a strange pale glow. In its center stood an enormous bell, suspended from thick iron chains that disappeared into shadows above. The bell's surface shimmered, etched with the same spirals, but now glowing faintly, as if alive. Margaret's voice trembled. "This is it." The bell rang once, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through her bones. The journey was far from over.
The deep toll of the bell lingered in the chamber long after the sound faded, vibrating through Margaret's bones like a pulse. The pale glow from the spiraled etchings bathed the room in an otherworldly light, revealing details she hadn't noticed before. Carved into the stone floor was a pattern, an intricate labyrinth of spirals and lines, winding around the base of the bell like roots. At the center lay a shallow indentation shaped like a hand. Margaret knelt, running her fingers along the cold stone. The stone seemed to shift beneath her touch, subtle but unmistakable, as if alive. Her fingers tingled, the stone humming softly under her skin. A whisper rose again, soft but clear. "Place your hand." Her heart hammered, but she obeyed. Margaret pressed her palm into the indentation. The cold stone bit at her skin, then pulsed with warmth, spreading up her arm. The bell's glow intensified, illuminating the entire chamber in a radiant light. Suddenly, images flashed behind her eyelids. A child's laughter, a mother's lullaby, shadows moving in the forest, and Leo reaching up to the bell tower. Then darker things, faces twisted in agony, a door closing, a promise broken. The warmth turned to fire, searing yet not burning. A voice spoke directly in her mind, low and urgent. "Free us." Margaret gasped, pulling her hand away. The bell's glow dimmed, the chamber returning to shadow. She looked around, breathless. The door she had entered through was now gone, replaced by solid stone.
The only exit was the bell itself. Her resolve hardened. The bell's secret was hers to uncover. The deep toll of the bell lingered in the chamber long after the sound faded, but the stone chamber was deathly silent, except for the faint hymn that lingered after the bell's toll. Margaret steadied her breath, heart pounding in her ears as memories flooded her mind. Fragments of childhood, long buried, and now painfully vivid. She saw the parsonage again, the collapsing roof, the moss-covered windows, Leo's pale face, the night he vanished into the forest, the broken promises whispered in the dark. A sudden chill wrapped around her, and the whispers returned, softer now but more urgent. Remember, don't leave. Help us. Margaret closed her eyes, letting the voices guide her. The bell above vibrated faintly, as if alive, waiting. Her hands traced the carved labyrinth on the floor, following its twisting paths like a thread through a maze. Each turn brought visions. Children laughing in sunlight, shadows creeping under trees, a tall figure watching silently from the edge of the woods. The last image hit her with a jolt. A memory she had buried deeper than she realized. A promise she had made to come back, to set things right. Margaret opened her eyes, determination hardening her gaze. The hollow was not done with her. The bell's voice had called, and she had answered. She took a deep breath and reached up toward the bell's heavy rope, knowing the path ahead would demand everything she had left to give.
Margaret's fingers wrapped tightly around the thick, cold rope hanging from the bell's iron yoke. The bell tower beneath the parsonage had loomed over her childhood with silent menace. But here, deep underground, the bell was alive with a presence she could feel humming in her bones. Her heart thudded as she pulled gently. The bell swayed, releasing a deep, sonorous tone that echoed through the chamber and spiraled up into the darkness above. As the sound rolled, the stone floor beneath her feet trembled faintly, and the air thickened with voices, whispers that seemed to flow from the very walls. Free us. Remember us. Don't forget. Margaret's eyes scanned the shadows, catching glimpses of pale shapes drifting just beyond the light's reach. Ghostly children reaching toward her with hollow, desperate eyes. She pulled the rope again. The bell rang louder, longer. The chamber flooded with light as the glowing symbols along the walls blazed bright. The whispers turned into cries, sorrowful and urgent, washing over her like a wave. Find the door. Find the voice. Break the silence. Her hands ached, but she held firm. A sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing her flashlight and plunging her into darkness. Margaret's breath hitched. From the void came a voice, clear, childlike, and trembling. Help me. The bell's final toll faded as a new journey began. The darkness pressed in like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Margaret's eyes strained, searching for anything beyond the faint glow still lingering on the bell's etched surface. Her breath came shallow and quick, her heart pounding like a drum in the silence. Then, soft and trembling, a voice floated through the blackness. Margaret! The single word hung in the air, fragile as a spider's web. She whispered back, Leo? A faint rustle answered, like footsteps on dry leaves. Margaret reached into her pocket and found the small silver locket she'd carried since childhood, the one with Leo's picture inside. She clutched it tight,
whispering a prayer she hadn't spoken in years. "Where are you?" The voice came again, closer this time, but still just out of reach. "Here, beneath." A chill swept through the chamber, carrying with it the scent of earth and forgotten memories. Margaret took a cautious step forward, her hands trailing along the cold stone walls. She urged, "Show me." A faint shimmer appeared ahead. A translucent figure, small and pale, with wide, sorrowful eyes. Leo. His mouth moved, but no sound came. Then his fingers pointed toward a narrow passageway, barely visible in the shadows. Margaret swallowed her fear and stepped forward. The voice whispered once more, barely audible, "Find the door."
Margaret's footsteps echoed softly as she stepped into the narrow passageway Leo's ghostly finger had indicated. The walls here were damp and uneven, ancient stone slick with moisture. The air grew colder, the silence so complete it pressed against her ears like a physical weight. She held the locket tightly, its cold metal a small comfort in the oppressive dark. Her flashlight flickered once, then steadied, revealing faint symbols scratched into the stone. Spirals, knots, and strange twisting lines that seemed to writhe as she watched. The passage sloped downward, leading deeper beneath the earth. The faint scent of earth and decay grew stronger. Somewhere in the distance she heard the faintest sound, a soft scratching like nails against stone. Margaret swallowed her fear, pushing forward. Her heart pounded, but she was no longer just a frightened child. She was the sister who had been called back, bound by a promise and a pain too deep to ignore. As she rounded a bend, the passage opened into a small chamber. There, set into the far wall, was an iron door. This one was smaller, old but sturdy, sealed shut with an ancient lock etched with the same spiral symbol that haunted every corner of the hollow. The bell's toll echoed faintly behind her, a reminder that time was running out. Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out the rusted key she had found earlier. Her hands trembled as she inserted it into the lock. With a creak and a groan, the door slowly opened. Beyond lay darkness and hope. Margaret stepped through the iron door into a room unlike any she had seen before. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and forgotten sorrow. The faint glow from the bell chamber behind her gave way to near complete darkness, broken only by the weak beam of her flashlight. The walls here were lined with ancient shelves carved directly into the stone, each holding objects covered in dust and cobwebs, faded photographs, cracked porcelain dolls, and small wooden carvings worn smooth by time. She moved slowly, fingers tracing the outlines of a child's drawing pinned to the wall, the same stick-figure girl from the drawing on the parsonage door. Next to it was a journal, its leather cover cracked and fragile. She opened it carefully. The pages were filled with shaky handwriting, notes, pleas, and names. Names of children who had come to the hollow and never left. The journal spoke of a bell that called to lost souls, binding them to the hollow unless released. A sudden cold breeze swept through the chamber, extinguishing her flashlight. She fumbled, heart racing, and the bell tolled softly from above, as if answering her fear. In the darkness, a whisper echoed. Find the voice. Free us all. Margaret's resolve hardened. She closed the journal and stood, ready to face whatever secrets the hollow still held. The darkness was thick, pressing in on Margaret from all sides as she fumbled to relight her flashlight. When the beam finally flickered back to life, it revealed the far corner of the chamber, where a faint glimmer caught her eye.
She stepped toward it, heart pounding. There, nestled in a stone alcove, was a small carved box. Its surface was etched with the familiar spiral symbol, worn smooth by time, but still unmistakable. Margaret reached out and lifted the lid. Inside lay a bundle of old parchment, tied with a faded ribbon. She untied it carefully, revealing pages of handwritten notes, a collection of strange symbols, and a series of letters, fragments of a diary. As she read, the voice returned, a whisper, barely audible, echoing in her mind. Find the voice that calls, the one who rings the bell. The diary spoke of a figure, a keeper of the bell's secret, a man who had lived centuries ago, bound to the hollow by a terrible curse. Margaret felt a shiver run down her spine. The keeper's voice was the key. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed through the chamber, a faint humming, rising and falling like a song. She followed it, deeper into the shadows. Margaret moved cautiously toward the source of the faint humming, her flashlight beam trembling as it pierced the thick darkness. The sound was haunting, a low, mournful melody that seemed to ripple through the air itself, stirring the dust and shadows around her. The walls of the chamber narrowed into a tight corridor, lined with strange symbols etched deep into the stone. The spirals twisted and turned like a serpent's coil, drawing her forward as if guiding her steps. As she walked, fragments of memory surfaced. An old man in a black cloak, a bell's echo carried on the wind, and a warning whispered through the hollow. The keeper waits. The humming grew louder, filling the air with a bittersweet sadness. At the corridor's end, a small wooden door stood slightly ajar, bathed in a soft silver glow. Margaret pushed it open. Inside was a small room, bare except for a worn wooden stool and a table covered in faded parchments. At the center stood a figure, a man, or what once had been a man, shrouded in shadows, his eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. He looked at her, voice a rasp, like dry leaves rustling. "You've come to hear the song?" Margaret nodded, heart pounding. The keeper lifted a garnered hand, and the bell's melody swelled, filling the chamber with a song of sorrow, hope, and ancient promises.
The figure's glowing eyes bore into Margaret's soul as he began to speak, his voice a rasping echo, ancient and heavy with sorrow. "I am the keeper of the bell, bound to this hollow for centuries. Once I was like you, a protector, a guardian, but the bell's curse trapped me here, tethered to its mournful song." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within her. "The bell calls to the lost, children who wandered too close, souls who broke their promises. It binds them, holds them captive between worlds. Only one who remembers, one who bears the bloodline, can free them." Her breath caught. The truth dawned cold and clear. She was the one. The promise she'd forgotten was a chain linking her to the hollow, to Leo, and to the other lost souls. "But how?" she asked, voice trembling. The keeper gestured to the bell. "The bell's song is a riddle, a call for remembrance and release. You must ring it, truly ring it, not just with hands, but with heart. Only then will the spirits be freed."
Margaret looked up at the great bell, its etched spirals glowing softly. The path ahead was clear, but fraught with danger and sacrifice. She nodded, determination burning in her eyes. I will set them free. Margaret stood beneath the great bell, its cold iron surface humming with a latent power that thrummed through her bones. The keeper's words echoed in her mind. Ring the bell with heart. But what did that mean? How could a simple toll release the weight of centuries? The chamber seemed to hold its breath. She gripped the thick rope again, feeling the weight of the bell above her. Her fingers trembled, but she steadied her breathing, closing her eyes and reaching deep inside herself. She thought of Leo, his pale face and silent pleas, of the lost children whose whispers filled the hollow, of the promise she had made so long ago. Then, with a slow, deliberate pull, she began to ring the bell. At first, the sound was hesitant, a low, dull thud. But as she poured every ounce of memory, sorrow, and love into the motion, the bell's tone deepened and soared, filling the chamber with a resonant, haunting melody. The walls seemed to pulse in time with the ringing, and the shadows around her shifted and danced. Ghostly figures emerged from the darkness, children with outstretched hands, their faces alight with hope and longing. Margaret's voice rose, joining the bell's song, a prayer for release and forgiveness. The keeper watched silently, eyes gleaming. As the final toll faded, a brilliant light flooded the chamber, and the spirits began to rise, their forms becoming more solid, more real. They smiled at her, voices echoing in gratitude. "Thank you," they whispered. The bell fell silent. Margaret felt a peace she had not known in decades settle over her. But the hollow still held one last secret.
The light from the freed spirit slowly dimmed, leaving Margaret alone in the quiet chamber. The air, once heavy and oppressive, now felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The keeper stepped forward, his glowing eyes softening. "There is one truth you must know," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "The Hollow's curse was born not from the bell itself, but from the promise broken by your family. The one who remains bound is not the lost children, but the keeper." Margaret's heart clenched. "You," she whispered, "you're still trapped?" He nodded slowly. "I am bound until another takes my place, carries the burden forward. The bell calls to those who will listen, those who will remember. This time, it has chosen you." Her hands trembled. The bell loomed above, silent and heavy. "Is there no way to break it?" she asked, voice desperate. The keeper shook his head. "Only the bearer of the bell's burden can free themselves by passing it on. You must decide if you will stay, or if the Hollow will claim you as it has claimed me." A cold realization settled in Margaret's chest. The cycle was not over, it was beginning anew. She looked up at the bell, the spirals glowing faintly in the darkness. The promise was hers to keep. Margaret stood beneath the bell, the weight of the keeper's words pressing down on her like a shroud. The chamber was silent save for the faint echo of the bell's last toll and the soft sighs of the spirits now free. Her mind raced. The curse, the promise, the burden, It all came down to one unthinkable truth. She could take the keeper's place, become the next guardian, bound forever to the hollow and its bell, or she could leave, but at a terrible cost. "Is there no other way?" she whispered, voice shaking. The keeper's gaze was steady, sad. "The bell chooses its bearer. Only one can hear its call. Only one can carry the weight." Margaret's hands clenched the rope. Memories of Leo, of lost years, of childhood fear and abandonment flooded her senses. The hollow had called her back for a reason. Her breath caught. "I will take the burden," she said, voice firm despite the terror gripping her. The keeper nodded solemnly. "Then your journey truly begins." A sudden warmth spread through Margaret's body as the bell's glow enveloped her. She felt roots, deep, ancient, wrapping around her soul, binding her to the hollow. The voices returned, but now they were gentle, grateful. "You will not be alone," the keeper said, "and one day someone else will hear the bell and come." Margaret took a deep breath, steeling herself for the endless tolls to come. The bell's song was hers now.
The light around Margaret dimmed, settling into a soft glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. The weight of the bell's burden pressed down on her, not as a chain, but as a steady rhythm, binding her to the hollow in a way she understood now. The keeper before her faded slowly, his form dissolving like mist into the cold stone walls. His eyes met hers one last time, a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Thank you," he whispered, voice fading. "May you find the strength I could not." Margaret stood alone in the chamber, the bell's spirals glowing faintly in her palms as the rope settled against her fingers. The hollow was quiet, but she could feel the lives it held within its grasp, the lost, the forgotten, the waiting. She lifted the rope once more, and the bell rang out, not mournful now, but steady, resolute, a call across time. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and far away a child's voice whispered on the breeze. The hollow had a new keeper, and the promise was kept. Margaret stepped out of the parsonage, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. The sun, though low in the sky, cast long shadows that stretched like fingers through the twisted trees. The hollow seemed different now, alive yet calm, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath for centuries. She looked back at the house, the bell tower still standing, the spirals faintly glowing against the creeping dusk. Her feet felt lighter than when she had arrived, though the weight of the bell's burden pulsed deep inside her. A soft breeze carried a child's laughter, distant yet unmistakable. She closed her eyes and smiled, a small, bittersweet curve of her lips. The journey had changed her. The promise had been fulfilled, but the path ahead was uncharted. As she walked down the winding path, the trees seemed to part gently, guiding her steps. Margaret didn't look back again. The bell's song echoed softly behind her, a lullaby to those who had finally found peace.
Margaret returned to the world beyond the hollow, carrying the secret of the bell and the weight of her new role like a quiet flame burning deep within her chest. The air outside felt different, lighter, but charged with the memory of what she had left behind. She settled into her small-town life, but the hollow's call was never far. At night, the bell's toll echoed faintly in her dreams, a reminder of the lives intertwined with her own, of promises made and kept. The villagers noticed a change in her, a calmness,
a somber wisdom that seemed to age her beyond her years. She spoke little of the past, but her eyes held the stories of lost children and ancient curses. In time, Margaret began recording her experiences in a journal, hoping to preserve the truth for the day someone else might hear the bell's call. She wrote of the hollow, the keeper, the spirits, and the promise that bound her. One evening, as twilight settled, she received a letter. No return address, just her name written in that familiar looping script. Inside, a single line: "The bell tolls again." Margaret stared at the letter in her hands, the words inscribed in the same elegant script that had summoned her back to the hollow so many years ago. Her heart quickened, a mixture of dread and resolve tightening her chest. The bell tolls again. She knew what it meant. The cycle was turning once more. Somewhere, someone else was hearing the call, the soft, persistent ringing that could not be ignored. As night fell, Margaret sat by her window, the journal open before her. She traced the faded spirals on the pages, whispering the ancient words the keeper had taught her. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a faint melody, the bell's song, distant but growing stronger. She closed her eyes and listened. The hollow was waking. The bell was calling. And soon, a new voice would answer.
Margaret's hands trembled as she closed her journal, the weight of the letter heavy in her thoughts. The bell's call was no longer a distant echo. It was a summons she had to prepare for. She stood and moved to a small wooden chest tucked beneath the window, a chest she hadn't opened since returning from the hollow. Inside were relics of her journey, the tattered drawing, the silver locket, the rusted key, and a faded photograph of Leo. Carefully, she arranged them on the desk, surrounding the journal with symbols drawn from the keeper's teachings. She lit a candle, its flickering flame casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Whispers filled the room, soft as a breeze, but unmistakable. Spirits, grateful and restless alike, bound to the bell's song. Margaret's voice was steady as she spoke the ancient incantations, weaving protection and guidance into the night. She knew that soon someone would come, a soul drawn by the bell, chosen by the hollow, and when they arrived, Margaret would be ready to guide them. The bell tolled softly into distance, a lullaby for those who would come after.
Margaret led the young woman to the worn wooden table where the journal and relics lay. The woman's hands trembled as she reached for the tattered drawing, tracing the red crayon words with her fingertips. "You'll need to learn the bell's song," Margaret said softly. "It's more than a sound. It's a promise, a burden, and a hope all at once." The woman looked up, eyes bright with fear and determination. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. Margaret smiled gently. "None of us ever are, but the hollow chooses for a reason. You carry the legacy now." She handed her the rusted key and the silver locket. "These will guide you." The bell tolled faintly, as if approving the passing of the burden. Margaret felt a strange peace settle over her. The weight she had carried for so long was lighter now, shared with another. Together, they would keep the promise.
Margaret and the young woman stood beneath the great bell in the hollow, the cold iron surface gleaming faintly under the dim light. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of damp earth mingling with the whispers of spirits waiting to be freed. The woman's hands trembled as she reached for the thick rope, her eyes locking with Margaret's. Encouragement and shared resolve passed between them like an unspoken vow. With a deep breath, they pulled together. The bell rang out, clear, powerful, and unwavering. The sound rolled through the hollow, echoing between trees and stones, stirring the air with a gentle yet insistent call. The spirits emerged, pale and glowing, their faces alight with hope and gratitude. They drifted toward the women, voices rising in a chorus of thanks. Margaret smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment flood her heart. The legacy lived on, not as a burden, but as a shared song. Together, they would answer the bell.
The bell's ringing faded, but a new sound stirred in the hollow. A low, unsettling whisper that slithered through the trees like a shadow breaking free. Margaret and the young woman exchanged wary glances. "The hollow is restless," Margaret said quietly. "Freeing the spirits does not end the curse. There are darker things here." The woman's eyes widened. "What kind of things?" Margaret looked toward the dense forest, where branches twisted unnaturally and the fog thickened. Echoes of the past, regrets that cling like shadows. The bell calls to the lost, but the hollow also hides secrets, ones that don't want to be found. A cold breeze swept past, carrying a faint, chilling laughter. Margaret's heart quickened. The journey was far from over. Together, they steeled themselves to face what lurked beyond the light. The chill in the air deepened as Margaret and the young woman ventured beyond the clearing, the light from the bell's chamber fading behind them. The forest seemed to close in, branches clawing at their coats, shadows shifting just beyond sight. A whisper slipped through the trees, cold and serpentine. "Leave, leave, leave." But the voices they had freed were stronger, a chorus of hope that pushed back the darkness. Margaret gripped the woman's hand. "The hollow tests us now. We must be stronger than its fear." The woman nodded, eyes shining with determination. "I'm ready." Suddenly the whisper coalesced into a voice, low, angry, and accusing. "You brought the bell's song. Now you will carry its curse." A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked, face obscured, but eyes burning like coals. Margaret's breath caught. "The keeper before me?" The figure nodded slowly. "And the darkness that remains." Two women faced the shadow together, knowing that to save the hollow and themselves, they would have to confront not just the spirits, but the curse that bound them all. The shadowy figure stepped closer, the dim light revealing flickers of a worn face, lines etched deep with centuries of sorrow and regret. His eyes, burning coals in the darkness, held a mixture of bitterness and longing. Margaret tightened her grip on the young woman's hand. "You were the keeper before me," she said softly, "bound by the bell's curse." He nodded, voice a gravelly whisper. "Bound and broken. The hollow took my soul, and the bell chained me here. I was both protector and prisoner." The woman stepped forward, her voice steady. "Why the anger? Why the warnings?" The keeper's gaze flickered with pain. "Because the curse is not just the bell.
It's the darkness born from broken promises and forgotten souls. The hollow is alive. It feeds on fear, regret, and silence. Margaret swallowed hard. We freed the lost. Isn't that enough? The keeper shook his head slowly. Freeing the lost is just the beginning. To break the curse, the bell must ring true, with understanding, sacrifice, and courage. Only then will the hollow release its hold. He extended a trembling hand. Will you take the final step? Face the darkness within the hollow and yourself? Margaret met his gaze, determination blazing. I will. Together, the three prepared to confront the heart of the hollow's curse, the darkness waiting to claim them all. Margaret led the way as they descended a narrow stairway, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The young woman followed closely, clutching the relics Margaret had passed on, while the keeper's shadowy form moved silently behind them. At the base of the stairs, a massive iron door barred their path. The spirals that marked the hollow's secrets shimmered faintly in the dim light. The keeper placed a trembling hand on the door. Beyond this lies the heart of the curse, the place where light and shadow wrestle for the hollow's soul. Margaret nodded, steeling herself. Together, they pushed the door open, revealing a cavernous chamber, pulsing with dark energy. The walls seemed alive, breathing, whispering, twisting with shadows that reached toward them like hungry fingers. From the depths emerged a figure, neither fully human nor spirit, its form shifting and writhing with malice. The hollow's darkness. Margaret raised the bell rope, ready to ring true. The battle for the hollow's soul had begun.
The darkness surged forward like a living wave, tendrils twisting and curling with sinister intent. Margaret tightened her grip on the bell's rope, heart pounding fiercely in her chest. The keeper chanted an ancient incantation, his voice echoing off the stone walls, weaving a shield of light around them. The young woman stepped beside Margaret, her hands trembling but resolute as she grasped the relics, their combined strength a fragile beacon against the encroaching shadow. The bell rang out, a clear, powerful toll that cut through the darkness like a blade. The sound vibrated through the chamber, shaking loose echoes of forgotten memories and restless spirits. The shadow recoiled, writhing and hissing as the light pressed in. Voices rose, a chorus of freed souls, their whispers joining the bell's song, lending strength and hope. Margaret felt warmth spread through her, the burden of the bell lifting slightly as the darkness faltered. With a final, desperate surge, the shadow lunged, but the bell tolled again, louder and more resolute. The darkness shattered, dissipating into wisps of smoke and silence. The hollow exhaled. They had won. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the cracked windows of the parsonage, bathing the hollow in a gentle glow. The oppressive weight that had long hung over the place seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile peace. Margaret stepped outside, the crisp morning air filling her lungs. Around her, the spirits she had freed lingered, their translucent forms shimmering in the sunlight, faces softened with gratitude and relief. The young woman beside her smiled, eyes bright with newfound strength. "It's over," she whispered. Margaret nodded slowly. "For now, but the bell's song will always call to those who need it." The keeper's form, once shadowed and broken, now appeared lighter, almost at peace. You have done what I could not. The curse is broken. As the sun rose higher, the hollow seemed to breathe anew. Trees straightened, the ground softened, and the silence transformed into a gentle symphony of life. Margaret felt the bell's burden ease, replaced by a quiet hope. The journey had changed her, and the hollow, forever.
The hollow was quiet now, but in that stillness, a new life began to stir. Margaret and the young woman stood side by side, watching as wildflowers tentatively pushed through cracked earth, and birdsong returned to the trees. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The shadows that had haunted the woods seemed to retreat, leaving space for growth and renewal. Margaret reached into her pocket and touched the silver locket, a symbol of her journey, her loss, and her strength. The young woman turned to her, a hopeful smile on her face. What happens now? Margaret sighed softly, a bittersweet smile curling her lips. Now we wait. The bell's legacy continues, and one day it will call again. But for the first time in decades, the call felt less like a curse and more like a promise. Together, they walked away from the hollow, carrying its story with them, guardians of a fragile peace, keepers of an ancient song. And somewhere deep in the woods, the bell hung silently, its voice at rest until the next time. Years passed, but the story of Cold Earth Hollow never faded from Margaret's thoughts. The journal grew thick with notes and reflections, warnings and wisdom passed down from the keeper and enriched by her own experiences. Though the hollow lay silent, its echoes reached far beyond the woods, whispering to those sensitive enough to listen. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Margaret would hear a faint tolling in the distance, as if the bell was reminding her of the promise that bound them all. She knew the cycle was endless, and someday someone else would answer the call. The legacy lived on, not just in the hollow, but in hearts willing to remember, to carry the burden, and to ring the bell with courage. The story was far from over.
The years had softened the edges of Margaret's memories, but the bell's call remained vivid in her dreams, a gentle summons beneath the surface of waking life. Though she had passed the burden once, she knew the hollow cycle was eternal, weaving through time like a thread that could never be broken. One crisp autumn evening, as leaves whispered outside her window, a familiar knock echoed through her quiet home. She opened the door to find a child, eyes wide with fear and curiosity, clutching a small spiral pendant, the same symbol that marked the hollow's secrets. "The bell! It called me," the child whispered. Margaret smiled softly, heart heavy yet hopeful. The legacy had come full circle. She knelt, placing a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. It's time. Together, they prepared to answer the bell's song once more, stepping into the shadows and light of Cold Earth Hollow, where stories never truly end. Margaret watched as the child, no more than 10, with eyes wide as the forest night, clutched the spiral pendant tightly. The familiar weight of responsibility settled upon her shoulders once more, not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. "You will hear the bell's voice clearly," Margaret said softly, "and it will guide you. But remember, the bell asks for courage, for compassion, and for the strength to face what others cannot." The child nodded, a mixture of fear and determination shining through. Margaret handed over the rusted key, the silver locket, and the worn journal, each item imbued with centuries of hope, sorrow, and sacrifice. As keeper, you carry the promise of those who came before. The hollow will test you, but it will also protect you. The child's small hands closed over the relics. Margaret felt the bell's quiet toll echo through the room, a gentle reminder that the cycle continued. Go now and listen for the call. The path ahead was uncertain, but the legacy was in good hands.
The child stepped into the fading light of dusk, the pendant warm against their chest. The forest around Cold Earth Hollow seemed to lean in, the wind carrying a faint, haunting melody, the bell's song reborn. Margaret watched from the doorstep, heart swelling with a bittersweet hope. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, alive with whispers of the past and promises yet to be fulfilled. The child's footsteps were tentative but steady as they followed the narrow path into the heart of the hollow. The trees parted like old friends welcoming a new guardian, and the spirals carved into stones gleamed softly, guiding the way. Behind them, the bell hung silent, its voice waiting, patient and eternal. The song was no longer a curse, but a call to those brave enough to answer. And with every toll, a new chapter began. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Cold Earth Hollow as the child disappeared into the gathering dusk. The bell, perched high in the ancient tower, remained silent for now. But deep within the forest, the air thrummed with a quiet energy, as if the land itself were holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Margaret stood alone on the porch, feeling the pulse of the hollow beneath her feet. She knew the journey was unending, that the bell's toll would echo through generations, calling forth new keepers when the time was right. Each ringing carried the weight of sorrow and hope intertwined, a reminder that some promises are eternal. She closed her eyes, hearing the faintest whisper carried on the wind. Ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the bell. The legacy was infinite. The toll would never truly end. The forest around Cold Earth Hollow seemed to breathe in the fading light, the trees whispering secrets older than memory itself. Margaret walked its winding paths, each step echoing with the voices of those who had come before and those yet to come. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, carrying the faint toll of the bell far in the distance, a call that stirred the very soul of the hollow. Leaves rustled like quiet voices, weaving tales of loss and redemption, of promises broken and kept. Margaret paused beneath an ancient oak, its twisted limbs reaching skyward like pleading hands. She closed her eyes, listening to the whispers that swirled around her. The hollow was alive, its heart beating with the echoes of the past and the promise of the future. And somewhere, just beyond the trees, the bell awaited its next song. As twilight deepened, shadows lengthened and thickened, pooling beneath the gnarled branches of the hollow's ancient trees. Margaret's footsteps slowed, senses sharpened by years of knowing the forest's moods. The air felt charged, a silent warning carried on the breeze. "The shadows gather," she murmured, eyes scanning the darkening woods. Beside her, the young guardian clutched the spiral pendant tightly, their face pale but resolute. The bell's call had led them here,
but the hollow's secrets were not easily uncovered. Suddenly, movement flickered among the trees, faint shapes drifting just beyond the firelight's reach. Whispers rose in a crescendo of voices, some pleading, some warning. Margaret steadied her breath. We must face what lingers in the darkness. The hollow tests its keepers. The guardian nodded, gripping the relics with renewed determination. Together, they stepped forward into the gathering shadows, ready to confront the past and protect the future.
Margaret and the young guardian pressed deeper into the hollow, the forest closing in like a living labyrinth. The trees seemed to lean closer, their twisted branches knitting together into a canopy that swallowed the fading light. The air grew colder, thick with a heavy silence that pressed against their skin. Ahead, a faint glow pulsed, the heartbeat of the hollow itself. They reached a clearing where the ground was scarred and bare, encircled by ancient stones etched with the spiral runes that marked the bell's domain. In the center stood the great bell, suspended from a twisted iron frame that groaned under the weight of centuries. Margaret stepped forward, feeling the bell's pulse echo through her bones. "This is the heart," she whispered, "where the curse was born, and where it must be ended." The young guardian tightened their grip on the pendant. Together, they prepared to face the final trial. The clearing was bathed in an eerie glow as Margaret and the young guardian approached the ancient bell. The iron chains creaked softly in the stillness as if breathing with anticipation. Margaret reached for the thick rope, her fingers trembling but steady. She glanced at the guardian, whose eyes reflected equal parts fear and determination. "The final trial," Margaret whispered, "is not just ringing the bell. It's facing the darkness within ourselves." Together, they pulled the rope. The bell's deep, resonant toll rolled through the hollow, shaking the very earth beneath their feet. Shadows erupted from the forest edge, swirling and twisting into forms both haunting and familiar. Faces of lost souls, memories of fear and regret. The air grew heavy, suffused with sorrow and longing. Margaret met the guardian's gaze. "We stand together. The bell's song is stronger with two." They rang again, the sound rising in a powerful crescendo. The shadows wavered, then began to dissolve into shimmering light. The curse was unraveling, but the trial was not yet over. The light grew brighter, flooding the clearing with warmth and clarity. The shadows that had once haunted the hollow dissolved into nothingness, carried away on a breeze scented with pine and earth. The bell's toll rang out like a triumphant song, a melody of release and renewal. Margaret and the young guardian lowered the rope slowly, breathless and trembling. The weight of centuries seemed to lift from their shoulders, replaced by a gentle peace that settled over the land. The keeper's voice echoed softly in their minds, a whisper of gratitude and farewell. The curse is broken. The hollow is free. The guardian smiled, eyes shining with tears. "We did it." Margaret nodded, feeling the final promise fulfilled. The bell song had changed from a lament to a hymn of hope. Together, they turned from the clearing, the first light of dawn painting the sky with hues of gold and pink. The hollow would never forget, but now it could heal. Years passed, but the story of Cold Earth Hollow remained alive, woven into the fabric of the land and the hearts of those who listened. Margaret and the young guardian became keepers not just of a bell, but of a promise to remember, to protect, and to guide. The bell hung silent in the tower, its voice at rest, but never forgotten. It waited patiently for the next time it would call. Margaret often walked the forest paths, feeling the gentle pulse of the hollow beneath her feet. The spirits were free, the curse broken, but the legacy endured, an unbroken chain of courage and compassion stretching across time. And somewhere, In the quiet hush of dusk, the bell's song whispered on the wind, a lullaby for those who would one day answer its call. The end was never truly the end. It was only the beginning.